My name's Jamie Boyle. I write books for a living. Made a few documentaries. I grew up in Teesside, lived in Scotland for a little bit, but predominantly Middlesbrough. I'm really trying to make a name now in writing books, making documentaries. I'm fascinated in people's, I certainly don't glorify anything, but these, people like Lee Duffy are part of Middlesbrough's social history, if you like. And I'm fascinated by things like that. Well, do you know what? It was probably purely by accident. I was a young boy, Celtic fanatic, played really at a good level in football. And one day, I was waiting for St Greasy to come on. I remember the date. It was January the 18th, November 1990. And I remember wanting St Greasy to come on, and all of a sudden, Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, it was the day they build up, and I'm thinking, here we go with these stupid guys whittering on about boxing. Obviously, it was a huge fight. I didn't really appreciate it in my 10-year-old young mind. I watched these guys. I remember Chris Eubank clearly saying he doesn't realise my ability. Nigel Benn was much more, how can I say it? Was much more vicious, and he was saying, "I'm going to give this boy a hiding," and instantly, I knew Chris Eubank was going to win. And if you want the reason why I thought Chris Eubank was going to win, was no human being could be that confident. So yes, I was football fanatical, but all day I was hooked on the build up to this fight. And to do this day, I mean, I'm 39, I'm 40 this year, so what's that? We're talking 30 years. And I've never seen a more brutal encounter. That fight had everything from the start, from Chris Eubank sabotaging Nigel Benn's music in about Nigel Benn sabotaged Eubank Simply the Best Walk. The fight had everything. It was barbaric. My lasting memory of that was Chris Eubank giving out a medieval roar to the sky and leaving Nigel Benn crying on Richard Steele, the referee's shoulder. And that was really lit my interest. I remember vaguely the year before Frank Bruno and Mike Tyson. Nothing, I didn't take any notice. I just remember everyone saying the Brit and Eubank, Tyson was this invincible machine. The year after, my friends started going to an amateur boxing club. The year after 1992, kind of followed them. And the reason why was one of my best friends at the time was called Gareth Maloney. And he went to a local boxing gym in Middlesbrough called the Old Vic ABC. And we must have been about 11, 12 then. And I used to go into his bedroom, and football was my sport. But I used to go into his bedroom, and I'd look up on the shelves and I'd think, wow, I want some of them. And there were trophies. And so basically, I didn't care. I mean, you can't draw in amateur boxing, but win or lose, I didn't care. I thought, and I got into boxing when I was 12, drifted in and out, football, but I started competing in boxing when I was about 14, 15. As a boxer, I'm not going to lie, I was never the greatest. I'd win 1, lose 3, win 1, lose 4, but I didn't really care. I didn't really matter, because I'd get to these shows and I'd travel all over the northeast, Hartlepool, Newcastle, Sunderland on a regular basis. And the first thing I'd do, I'd think, right, where's the trophies? Didn't care if I lost. Thought, where's the trophies? Oh, can't wait to get home and get that trophy in my window. And that's how my boxing started. You know, and it's kind of been an addiction, if you like, where I've just never been able to stop. And I'm 40 this year, and you know, I've met writers for the Boxing News, like Miles Templeton. I've sat in his office. He's another level, you know. But the average guy on the street, I think, you don't meet many Jamie Boyles. I'm such a historian. You know, I study the game. You know, since I've become an author in the last couple of years, I've met a lot of fighters. I've become great friends of some fighters. I've had, you know, Gary Sykes has stayed at my house many times. John L. Gardner, you know, all these, Ishan Pickering. And boxing is not as glamorous as people first think. But to go back to your first question, boxing, how I became involved in the drug, if you like. The passion that's never left me, and if anything, it's grown, has just been boxing, boxing, boxing. And from the age of 10, I've been hooked. It's a very bizarre story, but I won't lie. And I'll probably come across as a bit of a weirdo. It was a childhood friend of mine. He messaged me in July 2002, and the name never meant anything. Now, from the age of about 11, I've always been fascinated with Jack the Ripper and true crime. You know, I don't glorify anything. True crime, the Yorkshire Ripper. I like to read about, you know, the psychologists. You know, why do people do these things? You know, I remember my last year in primary school, people were getting dressed up as the Karate Kid, Wee Willie Winky, and I went as Freddy Krueger. So I probably was a bit of a not disturbed kid, a bit of a weird kid. And anyway, this guy texted me. He said, when you get a second, go on YouTube and type in Paul Sykes Wakefield. The name never meant anything to me. I'd never heard of him. And believe me, for over 20 years, I'd really studied boxing to the point of Jack Dempsey, Gene Tunney, you know, really, really far back. So anyway, I had a look at YouTube and I typed in Paul Sykes Wakefield, which what I seen as, how can I put it, a 6'3" Yorkshire angry chuckle brother. And straight away, I was obsessed. I wanted to know everything about this guy. You know, I watched that documentary. I must say, I'm not exaggerating by any imagination. I must have watched that documentary about 88 times. I sent off for the other half an hour, watched the rest of the documentary. Anyone who would listen to me, I was obsessed with that. I just wouldn't talk. People used to make a joke and say Jamie Boyle's brain is Celtic Paul Sykes, but it was like a loop. And to go back to your question, I watched Paul Sykes at Large, which is a very famous documentary. It's a cult classic. And I watched that. I read his iconic book, Sweet Agony, and I wanted to know more. And yes, this was 2012. Paul Sykes had passed away 2007. I wanted to know more, and I wanted to know so much more that the only way I could have found out more was for me to walk into the documentary, to walk into the book. And I've walked in and I've been to stay with Paul Sykes, my wife, several times. I've been inside prison to see Paul Sykes' son. I've been to Wakefield several times. I knew the Spenceleys from Middlesbrough. They were kind of in the 70s and the 80s. They had the Sky contract. They were big names in the boxing world. They promoted the Feeneys. They've promoted Dave Garside. John Spencer was a real who's who in the 80s. Paul Sykes had sparred with Joe Fraser in 1973. I tell you what, when Joe Bugner arranged to fight Joe Fraser in 1973, they needed a big heavyweight, and back then there was no heavyweight 6'8", 6'9", 7 foot like there is now. So they needed a heavyweight, and Paul Sykes had just got out of prison, but they rated him that much that they paid Paul Sykes to go down to an old gym called the Thomas à Becket on Kent Road, which was like London's major gym. And I've dug the footage out, and anyone can see that on YouTube. That was hidden for years until I come across. And Paul Sykes, he was an amateur. He'd done really, really well, you know, considering this was Smoking Joe. This was, I think Ali was off the scene by then. So this was literally the #1 heavyweight in the world. I think there's about a minute and a half on YouTube. So judge for yourself. Paul Sykes, Joe Fraser. Sykes was then denied for some reason and denied a boxing licence, and then he did a bank robbery in Haverton Hill, and how he got caught was, well, Haverton Hill is in between Middlesbrough and Hartlepool. And believe it or not, but Paul Sykes was highly intelligent. He had degrees, he had A levels, he had O levels, he had an education some school teachers couldn't hold a torch to. But ironically, how he got caught for that crime was he burgled a bookies, but he did it in a car, and he had a boxing glove in the window. So the next thing he knew, in 1973, Paul Sykes got 5 years. So by then, there was a really famous matchmaker, main matchmaker in Britain called Tommy Miller. And he had this idea. He said, Paul, the Yorkshire board aren't going to give you your licence. So Paul Sykes moved to Middlesbrough to move in with John Spenceley and Tony Spenceley. And I know, after spending many, many hours with the names of yesteryear, I know Tommy Miller and John Spenceley basically said, look, we'll look after him. We're going to get this guy to change his way. So in 1978, Paul Sykes was granted a boxing licence. Still to this day, he holds the record. His record was 10 fights, 1 draw, 1 loss by disqualification, 1 loss by, he reckoned he threw the fight, and he fought John L. Gardner. Now, if he'd have beat John L. Gardner, not many people know this, but I've done this through extensive research, and the bookies had him as a favourite, right? The Gardner was, John L. Gardner was 7-4, and Sykes was 8-13 for that fight. This is official. So Sykes was this big bad guy, the daddy of 1,000 prison yards, and Gardner was, you know, he was a British champ, he was a Commonwealth champ, but he wasn't really fancied. So this fight took place, and if you have a look on YouTube, you can see there's a video of me and John L. Gardner, and John L. Gardner's talking me through this fight. And it lasted 6 rounds. In the end, John L. Gardner said to me, the bully, which was Paul Sykes, the facts of the matter is, Sykes turned his back in the 6th round. Gardner won, but for the first 3 rounds, that was 50-50. But I know from sat with people who were really close to Paul that the only training he did for that fight was just sit drinking whiskey for weeks, because Sykes had such a tremendous, powerful punch that nobody was really, you know, to give you an instance, Neville Mead from Swansea was a British champion. Sykes knocked him so hard he did a U-turn. You know, he beat some decent people on the way up. We're now in 2020, and if you have a look at the record books, I think Sykes fights for the British and the Commonwealth heavyweight title in his 8th fight, and that's still a record to this day. I know Audley Harrison said when he went pro, he was going to fight for the title in his 5th fight. That never happened. So basically, I become obsessed with Paul Sykes. So I've written 2 books. Paul Sykes written his first one called Sweet Agony. That won the Kessler Award, which was, it was, you have to be in prison. It's a prison award. Charles Bronson wins it. Did they give him that to keep him quiet? It's been alleged. But basically, I'd done a book called Sykes Unfinished Agony. It's got 50 chapters. It's got people who knew him from prison, but it's also got a lot of people from the boxing element. People like Glenn McCrory, people like Peter Fury, people like Johnny Nelson, John Spenceley, his old boxing mate, and then I did a Sykes Further Agony, and then I did basically what I wanted to do, and then I thought, what do I do now? You know, I've been obsessed with these books. I've been obsessed with this guy called Paul Sykes. What do I do now? What do I do now? Now, the only other thing I really knew about was Celtic as a football team and boxing. You know, I spent many years boxing with my face, as you can tell. I've had my nose operated on. In 1995, I had a monocle diplopsy, which is, if I look at you, I've got 2 hands. If I look at my hand, I've got 2 of you. It's and I was 8 stone, and I boxed a guy called Paul DeRose. It's not as if he was Gerald McClellan or Julian Jackson. The schools got involved. It was quite serious. I was only a young kid. It was a freak incident. My son is 12 now, and it's broke my heart that he doesn't want to box. And my wife says to me, Jamie, well, why do you want your son to box when what happened to you? Because I was badly injured, you know. But for anyone out there who thinks boxing's barbaric and it's thuggery, I've met boxers who are really good boxers, but they can't fight on the street. And I've met really hard men who I've sparred with and I've played with. Boxing's a game of chess. It's a game of, it's an art. You know, and it's basically, it's a skill. And yes, it's hard to, you know, it helps you if you're brought up in the Salford or the Bronx or something. But you need, you know, mental toughness does help, but it is a skill overall.
So Jamie, what is your writing method? How do you write your books?
Right. As I've gone on, I've learned. When I first started, I was green and I was very thick. What I would do, like the police, I'd go and I'd interview someone, and say for instance I'd go and interview John L. Gardner, and he'd tell me all these interesting stories of sparring with Muhammad Ali and all this, you know, and he said it was like sparring with Jesus Christ. But then he'd tell me his grandkids and all his stories, which didn't need to be in the book. So what I'd do is I'd write everything out, and then after about, how many books have I read now? 12. I think it was about the 4th book, I woke up and smelt the coffee, and I thought, what am I doing? I'm doing the work twice here. So what I did is put my headphones on, dictaphone on, typed up every single letter, every word he said. But then how I do it is to answer your question, I proofread a book 4 times. The first time is to get rid of all the nonsense. Second time is to make sure it flows. Third time is to be perfect. And the 4th time is legal. Now, I've done books where I've had 100%, I've had views there on facts. I've had people who were there who can vouch for what happened. People, big names, I won't mention them. And they're talking about stars. It was for that book, actually, funny enough. But if I put it in the book, to cut a long story short, my publisher's done a book on Nigel Benn, and the story was Nigel Benn's sister allegedly said something to Kevin Lucian. It was put in the book. Kevin Lucian contacted me and said, do you realise, which the book was nothing to do with me, but I'm good friends with the publishers. So Frank Warren sent a solicitor's letter. Don King sent a solicitor's letter, and I said, guys, you've got to pull this. This is really big time. So even though everything was okay, I learnt a lesson from that. So to answer your question, I thoroughly do it because you can't be sloppy on this. You've got to be. I know a Lee Duffy book, Steve Richards done the Lee Duffy. I've got nothing against Steve Richards. I've never met him, but they're talking about the facts are in one of the Lee Duffy books. He spelt one of Lee Duffy's children's names wrong. That's for thousands to see. So that's a fact. And that, in my opinion, is sloppy. It's lazy, and it's something I don't want my name linked to. So to answer your question, I do it slowly, I do it thoroughly, but I do it on the ball. And every book is thoroughly read 4 times. And people think, I couldn't write a book, or I wouldn't know where to start. It's so hard. It's not. You do it in chapter by chapter, slowly, and then you can mix them up and you can put them in order. You know, you can do it in what order you ever feel like. You know, the Roy Shaw one at the start, I put it where he was dying. No one's ever heard that before. It was by the Shaw family. It was authorised. I was given their full permission. But as soon as you read that book, you think, wow, never knew that happened. So you can do it in all this kind of order. So as long as you do it thoroughly, as long as you do it professionally, just don't do anything sloppy, and just be aware you can't be sued because it'll ruin your career.
Jamie, dealing with people like drug dealers and some criminals or people who don't like what you're doing, that would scare most people and stop them doing it. So how do you keep going?
Excuse me. Right, I've had messages where they tell me what they think of me, and I'm not bothered about that. What hurts me, what does personally hurt me, is threats against my kids, which I've had. Oh, and your wife's a fat cow. Oh, and all this and that. And I think that says more about that person. But people said, you better stop doing this, better stop doing that. Do you know what? When I started writing books, it was for a pittance. People think, oh, write books. It wasn't. You've got to really, unless you're Harry Potter or someone gets dramatised, you've got to write 15 books to really establish yourself. And if I get shot writing the next book, I'll die happy and I'll die doing something I love. So I won't be bullied and I won't be put off. And nothing's going to stop me. So I don't get... There's people out there now writing statuses. And I see them, and there's like 350 comments and there's 250 negative ones about people. And I thought liked me. And I think I've never had a bad word in their life. And they're like, oh yeah, he's terrible, this. And I'm thinking, wow. But to answer your question, I won't be put off. I will not be put off. I'm 39. And in a way I'm putting Middlesbrough on a map because, Middlesbrough has this kind of, it's a small place, but it's pound for pound, it's a very, very rough place to live. It's had its characters, it's had its Lee Duffys, it's had its Brian Cockroach. They're all in social history. They're all, if you go in Waterstones and you have a look at their biggest, I've never know how to pronounce this word, genre, yeah, is true crime. And it is, and I sell, you know, I've done the books where it's done hundreds. I've done the books where it's done dozens, thousands, tens of thousands, right? But they're all true crime. But I won't be put off. I will not be put off, and I'm here for a long time. I'm going to be writing books about criminals, boxers, footballers, anything at all. I'll have a go at anything. True crime seems to be my main thing at the minute. I don't know why. Criminals come to me. My wife calls me a loom magnet. You know, a lot of these, you know, funny enough, the only Christmas card I got this year was from a lifer, a double lifer. He's inside a prison. You know, believe it or not, everything he's profits from that's going to charity. So he's not making any money from it, but people want to read that story. And just to answer your question, I won't be put off, and I'm here for a long, long time. And I've got Brian Cockrell is my 12th book in February, and if God spares me, touch wood, there's 100 books in me.
Tris Dixon is releasing a book this year called Damage, and it's about the damage from sport in general, but his focus is boxing. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the dangers of boxing balanced to the good that it does.
The good it does is I went to a boxing gym at 12. I never had a drink till I was 17. That kept me off the streets. All my mates were going youth clubs, drinking White Lightning. I never did that ever. Now, I wasn't the best boxer in the world, but do you know what? For them years, I had a gym 3-4 times a week to go. Let's be honest, boxing's not a tickling contest. The object of the matter is to punch you, and if I can't punch you in the head, I'm gonna break your ribs, and I'm gonna hurt you. And you know, in this book, there's a guy called Chubsy As If, and he's never had a fight in his life. And if I said to him, "Get outside now," do you know what he'd do? He'd run off. But he only ever went in 4 national championships. He won 2 boys clubs. He won 2 junior ABAs. He's never had a fight in his life. Now, he's not a fighter, but you go outside in that back garden with him, he'd hit you with 6 before you got your hands out your pockets. Yes, it helps to have a tough mentality in boxing. You know, we've all grown up and you've seen the Michael Gomez's, you know, the tough, ready kids. And 99 times out of 100, maybe more, the tough kids, right? You know, the starts when they're 10, 11. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I've been hating boxing. My eyes, I've got double vision. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I thought, I'm going to be a barber. Right, I was only 35, 36. I went to this barber course. It was going to take 8 months. I was going to be a fully blown barber. I thought, brilliant. I thought, I was doing voluntary work, sweeping floors, watching. Started middle of college, into the 8 months, 3 months, flying in. You won't know because you're bald, but believe it or not, sections, cutting a man's hair gets put into sections, and it's lines. And when I was looking at the lines, I knew 3 or 4 weeks before. I was in tears. I was devastated. Now this eye injury, some call it a detached retina. The correct term the doctor told me is a monocle diplopsy, something like that. And it's where I look at one line. If I look at one hand, there's 2. It's basically, I was looking at the line to cut hair, and I was seeing 2. And I was trying to hide it at first, and the teachers told me, and she said, "Look, you can't, son." She said, "Your hair's going to be lopsided." But the funny thing is when I was 15, 16, I thought, I'm going to be a barber. I'm going to open my own boxing barbers, Celtic barbers, and because I can talk all day. But do you know, 20 years ago, if I'd have did it, the same thing would have been. Now, because I boxed, a guy from Tom Hill's School of Boxing called Paul DeRose. If you're watching this, Paul, it's all your fault. Right, it was an amateur boxing contest, 8 2-minute rounds. It was a lot of blows to the head. After the fight, I was getting double vision. Went to school the next day. It was still happening. The school got involved. Was I flung in at the deep end? Possibly. You know, he certainly had more contests than me. That was a suggestion. You know, the gym wasn't the best I was going to. I know some people have said you shouldn't have been matched up, but it was, the fact of the matter is, I was 8 stone. I think the other guy was 7 stone 10. It was a flyweight, super flyweight. How hard can someone 8 stone punch? So that, and my wife said, you're not going to boxing, he's not going to boxing. But not to mention, I've had my nose rebuilt. I have your nose, your ears, and your throat are all built. I need it doing again. You know, sometimes I walk about like this. I'm on steroids for my nose, and it needs doing again. It's going to take me 5 weeks of being wrote off. I haven't got the time. I've got so many books to write. So to answer your question, boxing's a bloody brutal sport, and I can understand people wanting to ban it. But, well, it never will. It never will. No, there's not a chance because it'll go underground. But I tell you what, Trish, that's a really interesting subject of a book because there's so many boxers I've met, I know personally, and I knew them 10 years before they were pro, and the slur and the speech, you know, I know. I'm not going to mention them. I've got some really good friends, and I think, I take the mick out of them. And they talk like they're drunk. You know, James Toney, for one, he talks like he's had 12 sleeping tablets. And this beautiful art, this game, this sport, this passion, we're all fanatical about. It has its downsides, and I don't know. One a year dies maybe. But can you imagine how many people die going underground? To sum the question up, Tom, in my opinion, who's been hurt by boxing, my nose is damaged, it's embarrassing. When I'm in a pub, people think I'm on cocaine. You know, because I'm always like that. My ears, nose, throat, it's all linked and all this, and you know, and it is embarrassing. My eyesight's damaged. I can never drive a car. In one of them lenses, it's basically, it links it up. So you're talking to someone I wasn't even a pro. I was an amateur, and I've come away with my cuts and bruises. But would I do it all again? Absolutely. Would I put my son in it? Absolutely. It's disciplined. Particularly the British Boxing Board of Control are the best in there's 2 ambulances there every single fight. And in amateur, you know, it's so respectful, it's so, you know, yes, there's thugs in boxing, they're always going to be. It is what it is. It's not football, it's not rugby, it's not cricket, it's boxing. And the art of the matter is, you know, yes, you're gonna jab and you're gonna move, and that'll win you the fight. But also running over and punching someone's head in 30 seconds will win the fight as well. You know, but would I do it all over again? Absolutely. In that book, it's all about, I wasn't the best boxer. I boxed with my face. Do you know what I mean? But the answer to your question is, I think Trish Dixon subject is such a fascinating one. I'll be certainly buying that. And, you know, anyone who's ever put a pair of boxing gloves on, who's probably had over a dozen contests, there must have been it at some point. Whether I've been punched and you don't know where you are, and for a flash second you think, oh, I'm boxing here, you know, and you know, it is what it is. It's boxing. It's the noble art. It's pugilism, but you know, unless you ever get to the point where you're just going to make it punch into the body, it's not going to happen. And you know, God forbid, deaths are going to happen in the future. there's going to be more. It's just down to people like Robert Smith, the British Boxing Board of Control, making it as safe as possible. But I'd do it all over again and more. I only wish I was good, but I wasn't. But the discipline, taught me, kept me off the streets, and, I love the sport and I always will.
Who were your favourite boxers and why?
Right, it's an easy question really. I used to live in Glasgow when I was young, Scottish parentage. So I don't think it sank in until I was about 12 that I was never going to play for Celtic. So I used to box in tartan, and I used to have a tartan vest, and I used to even have the same boots. And when he used to box, Steve Collins, the Irish Celtic warrior, I used to even go like that. And I basically thought I was Steve Collins. I meet all these kind of boxers now. But there's not many people I haven't met in your boxing, in your crime, in your football. But he's one guy I would be really, really starstruck. Chris Eubank, because he hooked me into the sport. That Satan Greasy thing in the book. I knew he was going to win. Never watched boxing in my life, but I thought, it's humanly impossible. A human can't be that confident and lose. So, to answer your questions, Steve Collins, because he was a Celtic warrior, and Chris Eubank, because he was this unique, flamboyant, charismatic character, and I just was like, wow, who the hell? And I could have watched him all day, and I still can.
Great. Jamie, have you got any tips for aspiring writers?
Yes. Right. I started, and I never, ever, in my wildest dreams, thought my English has always been pretty good, but I was never off a level. Right. But we're in the 21st century now. What you've got to remember is there's laptops. Now I've got a friend called Richie Horsley from Hartlepool, ex-boxer, and do you know what? You can get programs, the computer does everything for you. You can pay $11.99, proofread your book. Do not let anyone talk you down. I've been told, oh, you're a waste of time. Oh, God, rolling your eyes at me. Oh, here we go. Another one of you still trying to pretend to do this. I have a guy, used to be one of my friends. He's now turned into my biggest troll because apparently, in his words, it needs 4 years to write a book. Well, I've just written 12 books in 3 years, and 6 of them have been bestsellers. Don't listen to any crap. You're gonna get it, especially if you get to if you put yourself in the media profile. Listen, there's famous people, and then there's people like me who are on the fringe. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, but I get them in the dozens. If someone doesn't tell me they hate me on Twitter, there's something wrong, And, if you want to write about pink elephants, if you want to write about dancers, if it's your passion, do it. Don't listen to anyone. It doesn't come easy, and you've got to write a lot of books. I didn't become full-time until I'd written my 4th book. It was all a hobby. And the truth of the matter is, I would have written a book for free. I would have written them books for free. It was a hobby. I love boxing. I still do. It's the biggest passion in my life. I'm no longer a flyweight, but on a Saturday night, I'm sat there, I'm glued to my chair, and I watch boxing. So for anyone who's, can I do it? My English is spelling. You've got computers there. You've got, it's the 21st century. Everybody should have an email. I'm not really clued up, but my wife helps me. But everyone out there, 70-80% of people are really, really clued up on the computer. It's the 21st century. If you're not, there's a problem, and it can do it all for you. If you've got a passion out there, whether it's cricket, whether it's snooker, whether it's, the army, golf, get out there and do it. But, you know, it takes a lot of books, and unless your books are dramatised, you have to write a lot of books. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, I'm in bed at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and my wife says, I'll give it a rest. You know, and I'm constantly there. And now I haven't got any hobbies. I used to like boxing. I used to like true crime. That's my job. So now I think, well, what do? I think I do it for a living. So there's nothing else. You know, and I can see a point, and I do need to get a life. But you know what? It's my passion. And to finish your question, I'm 39, and in reality, I've wasted 20 years of my life going from one job, forklift driver, scaffolder. I've never known what to do. I've never been lazy. I'll get out there, I'll work, I'm a family man. I'd pick dog poo up, you know. Most of my jobs have been minimum wage. I've never been bothered as long as I do it. But now I've got something I do for free. And anyone can do it, anybody. Listen, it might take you a year, it might take you 18 months. I'm only really taking off now, and it's on my 3rd, 4th year. I walk down the street and people ask me for photos, and I think, are you taking the piss? And I'm on Twitter, and there's people like Ricky Gervais, Robbie Williams, buying my books, Jamie Carragher, Tyson Fury, stars, and I think, how the hell do you even know who I am? And that can happen to anybody, because I'm an absolute nobody. I grew up on a council estate. I still am a nobody, but I'm just someone who works 7 days a week. My name's Jamie Boyle. I am a Teesside based author. I suppose I got into it, well, I've told you I got into it with Paul Sykes, and then when I stopped doing Paul Sykes, I thought, well, what do I do now? Because writing's very addictive. Did the boxing one, you know, and some have been bigger than others. I suppose my biggest has probably been Lee Duffy, and people on daily basis. I mean, Middlesbrough Waterstones has been there 20 years, and they said that's been the biggest ever, and it's gone absolutely crackers. This book, Paul Sykes' book, with the other two, has been signed by Western Edge Pictures. I'm not allowed to announce who's playing Paul Sykes yet, but he's a very famous BBC actor. He's a bit of a heartthrob. And that's going to take 9 months to make. The budget's £2 million. All that started from a hobby, do you know? And it's just so real. So anything can happen. Lee Duffy, I grew up in Middlesbrough. He was Middlesbrough's most notorious bad guy, if you like. I've took dogs from that. But as I said earlier, I'm not going to be put off. I'm not going to be bullied. Roy Shaw, they're talking about doing a film at the minute, Hereford Films. I'm making the documentary in May with the film. Dominic Negus, they remember him? He was for Audley Harrison. I've done the Terry Dickows, others. If you look on Amazon, I think I've got 12 books on there. They're all to buy if you just type in Jamie Boyle books. But do you know what? It's just a dream job. I get the trolls. Do you know what? If I was a bin man, I'd have someone open the door coming out shouting at me. Do you know what I mean? So it's all this walks in life, but do you know, it's a job I enjoy. I'm coming into making the documentaries. I've made the Lee Duffy documentary. I'm making Lee Duffy again. I'm making Roy Shaw, and we're doing Brian Cockrell. I've just finished doing Brian Cockrell, The Resurrection of Brian Cockrell, which is out in March. And for me, I suppose the biggest thing I have is I'm energetic. I have a lot of energy, you know, and there's people out there far better writers than me with flair and charisma. And, you know, if you put me in a class full of writers, I'd probably come last. But what I have is I've got a great, you know, just to get out and to just get out there. And that's what I'm going to do. And, you know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I write about the bad guys. I write about the books that probably people wouldn't have the balls to do. Will it change? No, it's not. It's not going to at all. If anything, I'm probably gonna write even more bad guys. Bad guys sell. I don't know why. Why, Jack the Ripper. I could read about him all day. People like a murder who done it. Sadly, boxers don't sell. Footballers occasionally, but people, it's true crime that really, really sells. That's the subject that people go berserk for. That's the subjects that I've had messages from Canada, America. Oh, thanks so much for a reply. I read it in a day. I took the day off work and all this. And, there was one thing. It was hard about the millennium because John Blake's were out and they were chucking money. And then all of a sudden Amazon come out and they were doing books for 99 pence. Not many people know this, but when there's a book for 99 pence, Amazon takes 70 pence. So you're left with 29p. Obviously, you've got your publishers and all that as well. So if there's anyone out there, always sell it for £1.99 because for some reason they take 60 pence. It's all the little tricks of the trade that you've learned. But it's the 21st century. I personally like the books in my hand. People like the Kindles. There's no ink involved in Kindles. There's no paper. But it is the 21st century and everyone likes different things. But I'm certainly going to be about, and my plan is I'm 39 and my aim is to be, by 45, the #1 true crime writer in Britain. There's a few at the minute. There's many years ago, there was Kate Cray, there was Bernard O'Mahony. They've all seemed to have gone off the radar now. And there's kind of me and Steve Rafe at the minute. We've joined forces. But, I've got years and years. I mean, God spares me. I just love writing books. And it's what I do 5 days a week. And the other 2, I'm promoting. So I'm never really not working. And it's... A lot of people are saying, "Oh, thank you. It's brilliant," and I've read it, and I've got because I think there was a time we all get lazy. When I spoke to Colin Hart, and he worked for the Sun, he said before smartphones out, they were selling 4.6 to 4.7 daily in the Sun. These days, the last 6 months, whatever, it was 600,000 to 700,000. There's no money in papers anymore because you can pick your smartphone up, my friend's had a website, £2,000. He's never made 1 pence from it because everyone's on Facebook, everyone's on Twitter, and it's the 21st century. It's probably only going to get worse. But my aim out there is, listen, I'm not all about writing about the bad guys. I've spoke to Jonathan Mudgate, I spoke to Neil Cox, Neil Maddison. I'd love to do a footballer. I'd have a go at any book, as long as you've got an interesting story. We've all got interesting stories, but the one thing for sure is Jamie Boyle's going to be around for a long, long time.
Thanks, Jamie.